Space weather. We're looking at the sun at 171 angstroms. Sunspot 2733 has quadrupled in size since it formed. It's got at least 12 umbral fields. Although it's been quiet while facing the Earth, the active region following it is not a sunspot. And we've got major magnetic perturbations on Earth. Before we look at that, let's look at the magnetic lines on the sun in 193 angstroms. Coronal holes rotating out, another one coming in. The Earth is about to cross the heliospheric current sheet. In fact, it is in the process of doing it now, I'm quite sure. First, let's look at the geospace. Now, this should be interesting to those who are interested in pole flip, pole shift, polar excursion, and the associated phenomenon. We don't always look at all three of these, but considering the amount of magnetic energy going on, anyway, we are going to look at all three because we see global level magnetic perturbations going on here. There's North America, getting all the way up into the 300 nanotesla range over east central Canada. Also, you can see the entire North American continent, the Pacific Ocean, and half of the Atlantic Ocean, also showing major perturbations. You can see some major pulses happening at the global scale here on this map also. I'll let that play through at least twice. We see a lot of energy leaking into the Indian Ocean here, as we have for the last week or so. Also, magnetic anomalies in the Pacific Ocean. There's a pulse where the whole thing looks like it shuts off right near the middle. I'll replay that for you also. Right there. Probably just a missing data point there. And here's the situation at the poles. Major geomagnetic perturbations going on right now. And we see some extreme pressure and density also in the magnetosphere movies. Here are your magnetosphere movies. First, we've got velocity. Next, we've got density. And I'll note that the density is actually very high. Even the density in the plasmasphere right around the planet is very high, represented by the dark blue. And lastly, let's look at the pressure, which is much higher than it's been in the past few days. There is a coronal hole wind stream hitting the Earth right now, which we will cover after this movie plays out. One other thing to note is that the angle of attack here is going to change. It's in the process of changing now. We would suspect, right now the solar wind's coming in at this sort of an angle. After the heliospheric current sheet crossing, it should be coming in at more of this sort of an angle. Moving on. So let's look at spaceweathernews.com. We do see a couple small B-class X-ray flares. Nothing very noteworthy considering that fairly large sunspot is facing the Earth right now. Now, as predicted or forecasted yesterday, we see some major downticks, some major negative BZ angles. And those are risk factors for earthquakes. We also see a non-continuous connection to the coronal hole. More of a sputtering connection there. Solar wind speed has come down below 10 protons per cubic centimeter, and solar wind density looks like it's still ramping up. We're over 500 kilometers per second. Here's the magnetometer anomalies. Not really anomalies, but the magnetometer spikes that we were talking about yesterday. Like we said, this crossing of the heliospheric current sheet will not be as minor as the last one, and we're seeing that reflected in the magnetometer. We have come off geomagnetic unrest conditions here. The KP just recently went from 4 back to 3. Here's your Cygnets forecast. That's through this January 30th. And you can see the current sheet crossing portrayed in this pane here. Also, please note the charges. The IMF polarity, blue being negative charge and red being positive charge. Here we see the electron flux, kind of all over the place, but characteristic electron deficits associated with coronal holes. We also see some surface charging, which we didn't really expect here, especially with the very low amount of electrons we've been seeing for the last days. So we see a bit of charging hazard near Central America there. And the F2 layer is looking very anomalous. I mean, we got 10 megahertz charge down here, but the sun's actually over here. So that's, we'd be expecting to see this charge in this area, not way down there. So that's very odd. We'll be watching that for the rest of the day. There's your aurora forecasts. Let's take a quick look at spaceweather.com also here. So the solar wind's at 539.9 kilometers per second. The density is 7.9 protons per cubic centimeter. Got some auroras there. Not sure where that was. Tromsø, Norway. Great aurora picture for you. And this 10.7 centimeter radio flux has gone up to 72. All right. Next, we'll look at the Gong 2, which stands for Global Oscillation Network Group. This uses ground-based magnetometers on Earth as well as magnetometers on stereo A and stereo B, seen here and here, to try to get a full picture of the sun's magnetosphere. Now, let's advance this to the last pane here. There's the last frame. Keep in mind the data is 1 hour and 43 minutes old. Please note this orange line going from the Earth to the corona. That line is set to snap across to this field. And when it does that, it's anybody's guess what'll happen. However, when you see straight lines like this, that indicates a very strong direct magnetic connection. When you see bunched up lines like this, it's not nearly as strong of a connection. So we're expecting some more continuing spikes in the GOES magnetometer when this happens, because ultimately these fields are much stronger than these fields. So there's going to be a polarity switch and some magnetometer perturbations at the same time. Earthquake risk remains in effect for everybody in earthquake-prone areas. Speaking of which, let's go to quakes.globalincidentmap.com to avoid using the US downgrade service website as much as possible. Here we've got 11 hours ago, we see a deep quake in Alaska. So Alaska should be on alert for another, maybe a 4.3 magnitude. Got a 3.9 in Anchorage also. A 5.5 in Tonga, that's one of the largest ones we've had in the past day or so. 4.9 in Papua New Guinea. Columbia receives a 5.4 at depth, so that area should remain on alert for a high level 5, at least a mid 5. Give you an idea where that's located. Right near those charging hazards we were just looking at. Also, we see a 4.4 in the Philippines. Another spooky 500-kilometer deep quake at Fiji. 4.5 magnitude. So that area remains on alert for a larger quake. And just coming in 24 minutes ago. Excuse me. The Philippines, a 5.5. No other quakes of note. There's your location. Let's look at volcanoes. There's been a couple upticks in volcanic activity here, especially from Popocatépetl. So, Shivaluch producing a 15,000-foot ash plume. And here's this crazy eruption of Popocatépetl. Check that out. Also Mount Manam, 14,000-foot ash. Excuse me, ash plume and a 15,000-foot ash plume. Tacona with a 7,000-foot ash plume. Now, Popocatépetl, series of very strong explosions on Tuesday, which destroyed most of the recent lava dome that had accumulated in the summit crater. The strongest was a powerful Vulcanian-type eruption at 2107 local time, which ejected incandescent material more than 2 kilometers height and distance from the crater, producing an ash plume that was 4 kilometers above the summit. The ejecta showered the entire upper cone of the volcano with glowing bombs up to 2 kilometers in distance and a 22,000-foot ash plume. Fuego produced a new volcanic ash cloud, Sabancaya sporadic puffs, and Planchon Petaroa continuous ash emissions. Take a quick look at AccuWeather.com's Doppler radar. We see the entire East Coast covered with rain. Heavy rain in the Northeast. Heavy thunderstorm bands going across Florida. A little bit of snow on the northwestern edge of that. And scattered snow showers across a large portion of the U.S. Here's the AccuWeather water vapor map. Give you some idea of what's going on here. We've got this dry air, which is more massive than the moist air, and that's causing some compression as it heads to the east. All this moisture needs to wait for this massive air to push it out to sea or to the north. And another weather nerd tutorial here. When you can't see the clouds, but you want to see the clouds, you can use the NASA GOES interactive weather satellite to view the shortwave radiation satellite map. And since it's not light out yet, this gives us some idea of what's going on in the clouds. We'll leave links to this and everything else. Next, let's cover a nonsense alert on ScienceAlert.com. Sir David Attenborough warns we've entered a new geological age. He wants to call it the Anthropocene, and those of us who understand what's going on want to call it the Eddy Minimum. Turns out that human-driven climate change has changed so rapidly during his lifetime that we're literally in a new geological age. Sir Attenborough claims that he's from the Holocene, and we're all from the Anthropocene, because humans are causing the climate to change, according to this guy who obviously doesn't understand atmospheric physics. Moving on. Oh, feel free to read the article if you like. We'll leave links. Next, we'll look at a phys.org article. I'm not going to go too in-depth into this, but this article is concerned with debunking the solar cycle / North American winter weather connection. They're talking about the North Atlantic multi-decadal oscillation here. We'll leave links to this article also. All I really want to say is that Earth's temperature lags solar output by about 2 years. Ben Davidson says about 3 years. So whether that's figured in their solar forcing models or not, I'm not sure. But what makes global cooling scary is at solar minima, when the sun picks up in activity, you've still got another at least 2 years until the temperature picks back up. And that's because of the latency of heat in the oceans. The air heats up and cools down quickly, and the oceans take years to heat up and cool down. Finally, a quick glance at an article from Cosmos magazine. A fairly common theory, I don't know why it's news, but a theory that some planet crashed into the Earth, which is what made the moon. Must have been a sulfur-rich core, etc. All of you Velikovsky fans should appreciate this. So have yourself a read if you want to hear about their findings, which are mainly geological in nature. And let's get back to where we started. At the sun. Here's 94 angstroms view. You know what's interesting is Moby, the famous record producer, DJ, global warming alarmist, whatever you want to call him, famously realized that we're all made of stars. And he wrote a whole album, literally about how we're made of stars. And I wondered, how did he not know that already? Anyway, here's a close-up of Sunspot 2733. Would not be surprised if we saw some more serious X-ray flares out of this thing. Although, it seems like the Earth-facing quiet effect is in effect. Thanks for watching, everybody. If you got any ideas for a 900 subscriber special, please leave a comment. Please don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy the content. Share on your social media, help us reach 1,000 subscribers. We'll be doing it all again tomorrow. Remember, when you're staring at sunspots, don't drink. And if you drink, stare at the sunspots anyway. Just don't drive.